Stories of vampires have been around for centuries, with the tales of Count Dracula haunting our minds and our screens. It's a tale as old as time, and over the decades more and more vampire stories and movies have come about. These are the top 5 worst vampire horror movies. Let's jump in. Coming in at number 5 is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
What is it?
It is the man himself. There, look, he's growing young.
Honestly, even if you haven't seen the 1992 vampire horror flick, you've definitely heard the horrific accent that came out of Keanu Reeves' mouth during the movie. It's pretty damn bad. It keeps me up at night, honestly. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola and starring the likes of Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, and Keanu Reeves, the movie of course follows century-old vampire Count Dracula, who comes to England to seduce his barristers, Jonathan Harker's fiancée, Mina Murray, and inflict havoc in the foreign land. Now, while the movie is beloved by many and holds quite a high rating, with reviews that praise Coppola and the cast's performance, there is one thing that's always stood out and diminished the overall quality of the film, that being Keanu Reeves.
Let them go. Our work is finished here. Hers has just begun.
Reeves was even described as having been out of his depth, and he was apparently blasted by Gary Oldman off-screen a number of times while filming. Total Film included Reeves in their 2010 countdown of the 29 worst movie miscastings, describing him as, I quote, a dreary, milky nothing, a black hole of sex and drama. That sucks. Reeves' attempt at a London accent has also been cited as one of the worst accents, if not the worst accent, in film or recorded film history. So while the film was actually quite good with a stellar cast and even a more impressive director, with an iconic story and good execution, the movie has since earned a cult status for all the wrong reasons and is often dragged down simply because of one star who had to go ahead and ruin the whole film. Poor Gary Oldman. He deserved more. Coming in at number 4, we have Priest. Perhaps you've seen Priest, perhaps you just saw the posters everywhere for it when it came out, which I don't know why they had the budget for it. It's a bad movie. Either way, I think we can all agree that this movie was an utter flop and quite a joke in the eyes of many. Released in 2011 and starring the likes of Paul Bettany, Carl Urban, and Christopher Plummer, the movie is loosely based on the Korean comic of the same name and takes place in an alternate universe where humanity and vampires have been at war with one another for centuries. Following the last vampire war, a veteran warrior priest lives in secrecy until his niece is kidnapped by vampires. The movie was largely panned by critics and viewers alike, with the consensus stating, I quote, Priest is admittedly sleek and stylish, but those qualities are wasted on a dull derivative blend of sci-fi and horror cliches. Sadly, the movie wasted quite an interesting idea by presenting us only with things we had previously seen throughout the genre and nothing new or original. It was incredibly disappointing, and if you're a Paul Bettany fan, I can assume you quickly chose to forget about this movie, as did I. Plus, Lily Collins is in it, and I'm really not sure how I feel about her. She's like a Bella Thorne to me. Just there, you know? Coming in at number 3, we have Bloodrayne. Oh boy, where to even begin with Bloodrayne? This movie is an utter mess. Released in 2005 and directed by Uwe Boll, Bloodrayne is a German-American vampire horror movie starring Kristanna Loken, Michael Madsen, Meatloaf, Michelle Rodriguez, and Ben Kingsley. Yeah, the weirdest actors to throw together in one movie, and a vampire movie. Very strange. The movie itself is based on the video game of the same name and follows Rain, a part human, part vampire from the 18th century in Romania, who was prone to fits of blind rage and sets out on a mission to avenge her mother, who was attacked by Kagan, the king of her race. Now, despite being a vampire horror movie, which are typically action-packed, Bloodrayne offers not much in the way of excitement or genuine thrills. It plods along at a grueling pace, making you wonder why you even decided to turn it on. Now, when I say Bloodrayne received bad reviews, I mean this received bad reviews. Extremely bad. When the movie opened in theaters, it was originally to be played at up to 2,500. However, it was quickly dropped due to little interest, with no one wanting to watch the movie. To quote one review, Bloodrayne is an absurd sword and sorcery video game adaptation from schlock maestro Uwe Boll, featuring a distinguished and slumming cast. Even the writer of the first draft of the screenplay, Genevieve Turner, absolutely hated it, calling it the worst movie ever made, which is quite the bold statement. Coming in at number 2, we have Dracula 2000. Oh man, I literally have nothing good to say about this movie, which is why it deserves the number 2 spot on our list. Released in 2000, of course, and directed by Patrick Lussier, Dracula 2000 stars the likes of Johnny Lee Miller, Gerard Butler, Christopher Plummer, who apparently loves vampire movies, and Jerry Ryan, with it following Dracula, who arrives in New Orleans in the 21st century and seeks out Mary Heller, a descendant of Abraham Van Helsing. Now, back in the year 2000, the world didn't know of Gerard Butler yet. This was long before The Phantom of the Opera, before 300, and before Law-Abiding Citizen, so his movie choices weren't the greatest at this point, resulting in him signing on for a role in Dracula 2000. One of the worst horror movies produced by Wes Craven. What was he thinking? I have no idea. Now, the film kicks off with a bunch of thieves breaking into the vault owned by a descendant of Van Helsing, but inside they discover an incredibly old and sexy, but also hungry vampire. The film was of course designed to attract a younger demographic using the Twilight method of casting young and attractive actors. However, the movie is truly terrible, the script is a joke, and the execution is like pulling teeth. It's recycled content and nothing we haven't seen before. If you had this on your watch list, I'd think about removing it. Gerard Butler and Christopher Plummer couldn't even save this train wreck. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have 30 Days of Night, Dark Days. Now, this direct-to-video vampire horror was an absolute nightmare to sit through, and not even the L Word's Mia Kirshner could save it, sadly. Released in 2010 and directed by Ben Kate, 30 Days of Night, Dark Days is a sequel to the 2007 30 Days of Night, which was a genuinely great horror movie starring Josh Hartnett and Melissa George. Now, I wish we were going to be discussing that movie, but sadly, we're talking about the sequel. Now, Dark Days takes place a year after the events in the first movie, with the population of the Alaskan town Barrow being completely decimated by vampires during the month-long polar night. This sequel follows Stella Olsen, who travels the world to convince others that vampires do in fact exist, following the death of her husband Evan. So backstory, Evan was played by Josh Hartnett in the original movie, and Stella was played by Melissa George, but neither one of them returned for the sequel, and I wonder why. Stella soon becomes the target of a group of bloodthirsty locals in LA who wish to take her down for airing the secrets. Now, like I said, this movie was not the best, not even close, with it being a direct-to-video release and receiving overall negative reviews. Fangoria described it as, I quote, "Rather than attempt to stay true to the source material, it departs from it as the film progresses. What follows is a generic story with flat characters set in an uninspired locale." Savage. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any vampire horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below. Perhaps we can do a part 2. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos, top 5 horror movies with almost no deaths. James Vance said 1408 is such a trippy, mind-bending movie you can't tell up from down, left from right. That is absolutely correct. 1408 is so good and everyone's sleeping on it all the time. It's like we watched it and then forgot it even existed. We all need to revisit. Kirsty said, cool list. When you said you never heard of Watch in the Woods, I wonder if you ever saw the TV horror movie Don't Go to Sleep with Valerie Harper. Never heard of that either. I feel like I'm missing out on all these movies from this specific era. I must have been asleep. Probably. But yeah, Watcher in the Woods I need to watch. Ian Robertson said, Lucy, the Babadook should not be on this list. Are you forgetting that in movies a single dog death is equal to 7 human deaths? P.S. looking wonderful as always. That is very true. I did forget about the dog and I'm very, very sorry. It's still on my list and I do not apologise. Red Comrade of Steel 1974 said, Lucy McPhee, your eyes are more beautiful than any stars in the night sky. It's very, very sweet, but it's also the help of a ring light I have, making them even brighter. Thank you. D.E. Harrod said, The Watcher in the Woods was one of the first truly scary movies I saw. I must have been in first grade. That and another scary Disney, Child of Glass. You should check that out too. Creepy. Very true that so many Disney movies from growing up that were very, very scary and get scarier with age. Like James and the Giant Peach. That was scary. Effed up shit, that's all I can say. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. And until next time, I'll see you later. Coming in at number 2, we have Dracula 2000. One sec. Train.